William Carter wiped the sweat from his face as he rode his horse through the hot, dusty canyon. He worked for the Thompson Ranch, checking the fence lines like he did every day. The sun was beating down hard, and he was thinking about getting back to his cabin for some cool water when he heard something that made his blood run cold. Gunshots, sharp cracks echoing off the rocky walls round him. William pulled his horse to a stop and listened carefully. More shots rang out, followed by angry shouts. His heart started beating faster. He knew he should turn round and ride away. Whatever was happening ahead wasn't his business. And getting involved would only bring him trouble. But something made him keep going. Maybe it was the way his mother had raised him, always telling him that good people help others when they're in need. Maybe it was the memory of all the times he'd wished someone would help him. When he was in trouble, William guided his horse up to the ridge and looked down into the valley below. What he saw made his stomach turn. A group of rough-looking men on horseback were attacking a small group of native travelers. Most of the travelers were already down, lying still on the ground. But one young woman was still moving, trying to crawl away from the violence. The attackers were laughing and shouting. As they went through the belongings of the fallen people, William could see they were taking anything valuable they could find. These weren't soldiers or lawmen. These were just thieves and killers. William's hands shook as he watched the scene below. He knew he should ride away and pretend he never saw anything. Getting involved with Indian troubles could get a man killed in these parts. But as he watched the young woman trying to escape, he couldn't make himself turn away. His mother's voice seemed to whisper in his ear, "Good men don't turn their backs on those who need help." Before he could change his mind, William spurred his horse forward. He pulled out his rifle and fired a shot into the air, shouting at the top of his lungs as he charged down the slope toward the attackers. "Hey, over here," he yelled. "There's more coming. The whole ranch is behind me." The attackers looked up in surprise. They saw William charging toward them and heard him shouting about more men coming. In the confusion, they couldn't tell if he was alone or if there really were more riders coming. "Let's get out of here," one of them shouted. "It's not worth it." The men grabbed what they could carry and rode away quickly, disappearing into the desert in a cloud of dust. William watched them go, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. When he was sure they were gone, William jumped down from his horse and ran to the wounded woman. She was young, maybe about 20 years old, with long dark hair braided with colorful beads. Her traditional dress was decorated with beautiful beadwork, but now it was torn and stained with blood. "Easy now," William said softly, kneeling beside her. He wasn't sure she could understand English, but he hoped his gentle tone would tell her he meant no harm. "I'm here to help you." The woman's eyes fluttered open. They were deep brown, like the color of rich earth, and even though they were filled with pain, William could see a surprising strength in them. She tried to say something, but no words came out. William could see she was badly hurt. Blood was flowing from a wound on her arm, and her breathing was shallow and weak. He knew he had to act fast if he wanted to save her life. His cabin was only a few miles away, and he had some medical supplies there from his army days. Very gently, he lifted the woman into his arms and placed her on his horse. She was light, but he could feel how weak she was as they rode slowly toward his cabin. William found himself thinking about his past. He had been a soldier once, fighting in the Indian Wars. Back then, he had followed orders without questioning them. He had been taught that all Indians were enemies, dangerous people who needed to be stopped. But now, holding this wounded woman, feeling her struggle to breathe, he began to wonder if everything he had been taught was wrong. This woman wasn't. His enemy, she was just a person who needed help. At his simple log cabin, William carefully cleaned her wounds and bandaged them as best he could. He had learned basic medical care during his time in the army, and he was grateful for that knowledge. Now, the woman drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes speaking softly in her native language. For 3 days, William took care of her. He brought her water, made simple soup, and changed her bandages regularly. Slowly, she began to get stronger. She would watch him with those intelligent eyes, and he could see her trying to understand who he was and why he had helped her. On the 4th morning, William's peaceful routine was shattered by the sound of many horses approaching his cabin. His heart sank as he looked out the window and saw Sheriff Reynolds leading a group of men from town. Their faces were hard and angry. "Carter," the sheriff called out, "come out here. We need to talk." William knew his time was up. Someone had seen him, and now there would be trouble. William stepped outside his cabin, trying to keep his voice calm as he faced Sheriff Reynolds and the group of angry men from town. But before he could say anything, the men pushed past him and stormed into his cabin. Tom Bradley was leading the group, and William's heart sank when he saw him. Bradley was known throughout Millbrook for his hatred of native people. He had lost his brother in an Indian raid years ago, and had never forgiven anyone with dark skin. "Just as we thought," Bradley said, his face turning red with anger when he saw the young woman sitting by the fireplace. "You've been keeping her here like some kind of prisoner. That's not true," William said quickly, following the men into his cabin. "I saved her life. She was hurt badly, and I was helping her get better." The woman, whose name William had learned was Grace, watched everything with careful eyes. She understood much more English than she let people know, but she stayed quiet. She could feel the danger in the room. Like a storm getting ready to break, Sheriff Reynolds looked uncomfortable as he stood in the doorway. He had known William for many years and had always thought he was an honest, good man. But the people in town were getting more and more angry about Indian troubles, and the pressure was growing stronger every day. "Look, Carter," the sheriff said quietly, "I believe you meant well, but you should have brought her to town right away. Now it looks suspicious to people." "Suspicious?" William's voice got louder. "I found her bleeding and dying in the desert. Was I supposed to let her suffer and die?" "You were supposed to follow the law," Bradley interrupted, stepping closer to William. "And now you've ruined her honor by keeping her here alone with you." The words hit William like someone had punched him in the stomach. He suddenly understood what Bradley was suggesting, and his face got hot with anger. "How dare you say such a thing?" William said, his teeth clenched tight. "I've treated her with nothing but respect and kindness." Grace watched the angry exchange between the men, her heart beating fast. Over the past few days, she had learned to trust William. He had been gentle and kind, never making her feel scared or uncomfortable, but she could see the hatred in the other men's eyes, and she knew they would never believe the truth about what had really happened. "There's only one way to make this right," Bradley announced, crossing his arms. "You'll marry her proper, or we'll assume the worst about what's been happening here." The words seemed to hang in the air like a death sentence. William stared at the men, unable to believe what he was hearing. Marriage was something sacred to him, something that should come from love, not from the threats of angry people. "You can't be serious," William said, shaking his head. "Dead serious," Bradley replied, his eyes cold. "Either you do right by her, or we'll have to take matters into our own hands, and I don't think you want that to happen." Sheriff Reynolds shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He didn't like Bradley's methods, but he also knew the mood in town. There had been too much violence lately, too much anger between the white settlers and the native people. "Maybe it's for the best, Carter," the sheriff said reluctantly. "At least this way, everyone's honor is protected." William looked across the room at Grace, trying to read what she was thinking. She met his eyes, and he saw something there that surprised him. It wasn't fear, but a kind of sad acceptance. She seemed to understand that this was their only choice if they wanted to stay alive. "What about what she wants?" William asked, gesturing toward Grace. "Shouldn't she have a say in this decision?" Bradley laughed, but it was a harsh, ugly sound. "She's lucky we're giving her the chance to be respectable. Most folks wouldn't be so generous with her kind." Grace finally spoke, her English careful but clear. "I understand," she said quietly. "This is necessary." William's heart broke when he heard the sadness in her voice. This proud, strong woman was being forced into marriage with a stranger, all because he had tried to save her life. He felt terrible about what was happening to her. "I need time to think about this," William said. "You have until tomorrow morning." Bradley announced. "Preacher Miller will be here at 10 o'clock sharp. You can both be ready for the wedding, or we'll handle this our own way." The threat in his voice was clear. William knew that if he refused, both he and Grace would be in serious danger. After the men left, William and Grace sat in awkward silence. The cabin that had felt peaceful and safe for the past few days now felt like a trap closing round them. "I'm sorry," William said finally, breaking the silence. "I never meant for this to happen to you." Grace looked at him with those deep brown eyes that had seen so much pain. "You saved my life," she said simply. "Now we must save each other." The morning sun was just coming up when Preacher Miller arrived at William's cabin, carrying his old, worn Bible. Behind him came Sheriff Reynolds and several people from town, including Tom Bradley with his stern, angry face. The whole scene felt more like a punishment than a wedding. Grace had spent the early morning getting ready. She braided her long dark hair carefully and smoothed out her traditional dress as best she could. She had found some wild flowers growing near the cabin and woven them into her hair. If she was going to be married, she decided she would at least try to look beautiful. William wore his cleanest shirt and had shaved his face carefully with his old razor. His hands were shaking a little as he waited by the door. He had never imagined his wedding day would be like this, surrounded by people who looked at him with suspicion and anger. "Let's get this over with," Bradley said, pulling out his pocket watch to check the time. "We all have work to do today." Preacher Miller was a kind old man who had known William since he was a boy. He looked troubled as he opened his Bible. "Son, are you sure about this? Marriage is a sacred thing, not something to rush into without thinking." "I'm sure, Preacher," William replied, though his voice sounded heavy and sad. The wedding ceremony was short and uncomfortable. Preacher Miller read the marriage vows quickly while the townspeople watched with cold, suspicious eyes. When it came time for William to say "I do," he looked directly at Grace, trying to tell her with his eyes that he would treat her with kindness and respect. Grace's voice was so quiet it was almost a whisper when she spoke her vows, but William could hear the strength underneath her soft words, and he felt a strange feeling of wanting to protect this brave woman who was now his wife. "You may kiss the bride," Preacher Miller said. Looking uncomfortable, William hesitated for a moment, then gently kissed Grace's forehead. It was a gesture of respect rather than romance. She looked up at him, and he could see gratitude in her dark eyes. "Well, that's done," Bradley announced loudly. "Now maybe we can all get back to our normal lives, after all the townspeople left." William and Grace stood alone in the cabin that was now their shared home. The silence between them felt heavy. filled with uncertainty and questions that neither of them knew how to ask. "I can sleep in the barn," William offered, trying to make things easier. "You can have the cabin all to yourself." Grace shook her head. "This is your home. I will not make you leave it." "Then I'll build a wall to divide the room," William said. "We can share the space, but still have privacy over the next few days." They worked out a careful routine. William would leave early in the morning to work on the ranch, while Grace stayed home to take care of the cabin and the small garden behind it. She seemed to have a natural gift for making plants grow, and soon the garden was full of healthy vegetables and herbs. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire and try to talk to each other. William had found an old book with pictures in it, and they would point to different objects and teach each other words in their own languages. Grace's English got better quickly, and William tried his best to learn some basic words in her native language. "What was your life like before all this happened?" William asked one evening as they shared a simple dinner of soup and bread. Grace was quiet for a long time, staring into the fire. "My family, they were traders. We traveled from tribe to tribe, bringing goods and news. It was free." "Do you miss it?" William asked gently. "Every day," she said honestly. "But I'm grateful to be alive. And you. You are a kind man." William felt his heart warm when she said those words. This woman had lost everything she cared about, yet she could still find things to be grateful for. It made him respect her even more. As the weeks passed, they began to understand each other better. Grace would hum softly while she worked in the garden, and William found himself looking forward to hearing those gentle songs. She would watch him work round the cabin, and he could see her beginning to relax and feel safer. One evening, as Grace was mending a tear in William's shirt, she accidentally pricked her finger with the needle. Without thinking, William reached over and gently took her hand to look at the small wound. The moment their skin touched, both of them felt something change. They looked at each other in surprise, suddenly aware that their feelings were slowly growing into something deeper than just friendship. "It's nothing," Grace said softly, but her heart was beating fast. "Let me get some medicine for it," William said, his voice sounding different than usual. As he carefully tended to her tiny wound. Grace watched his gentle movements and felt something warm growing in her heart. This man who had started as a stranger was becoming someone special to her. 3 months had passed since the awkward wedding ceremony, and life in the small cabin had settled into a comfortable daily routine. William and Grace had learned to understand each other's moods and needs without having to say many words. She would have hot coffee ready when he came home from work, and he would bring her small gifts from town when he went for supplies. Sometimes it was a pretty ribbon for her hair, sometimes a book with pictures, or new seeds for her garden. The people of Millbrook had slowly begun to accept their marriage, though some still watched them with suspicious eyes whenever they came to town. Grace had proven herself to be very skilled at healing, helping several families with herbal remedies when the town doctor was away visiting other places. Her gentle nature and obvious intelligence had won over some hearts, though others remained closed to her. One morning, Grace woke up feeling dizzy and sick to her stomach. She tried to hide how bad she felt from William, but he noticed her pale face and the way she kept holding her stomach with both hands. "Are you feeling all right?" he asked with concern in his voice. Grace nodded quickly, trying to act normal, but then she had to rush outside to be sick. William followed her, gently holding her long hair back and offering her cool water when she was finished. "I think I should ride to town and get the doctor," he said, very clear in his voice. "No," Grace said firmly, wiping her mouth with a cloth. "I know what this is. I am. I am with child. William stared at her in complete shock. They had never been intimate as husband and wife, keeping separate sleeping areas and maintaining a careful distance from each other. This child must have been conceived before the attack that nearly killed her. The father, William, asked gently, not wanting to cause her more pain. Grace's eyes filled with tears that began to roll down her cheeks. "My husband," she whispered. "He was killed in the attack. I did not know. I did not know I was carrying his child." William felt his heart break for her. She had lost not only her husband, but had been carrying this secret burden all alone, without thinking about it. He reached out and pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "I'm so sorry," he said softly into her hair. "You should have told me about this." Grace sobbed against his chest, letting out all the fear and sadness she had been holding inside. "I was afraid. I thought you would send me away. I thought the townspeople would do something terrible to us." "Never," William said firmly, holding her tighter. "This child is innocent, and you are my wife now. We'll face this together, whatever happens." As Grace's pregnancy progressed over the following months, William found himself falling deeper in love with his wife. He loved watching her hands rest protectively on her growing belly. Loved the way she would hum softly while she worked around the cabin. Loved the strength and grace with which she faced each new day. Grace, too, found her feelings changing in ways she had never expected. William's unwavering support and gentle care had healed something that had been broken inside her heart when he would bring her special tea for her morning sickness, or rub her aching back without being asked. She felt a love growing that was different from what she had known before. One evening, as they sat together by the warm fire, Grace felt the baby kick strongly inside her belly. Without thinking about it, she reached for William's hand and placed it gently on her stomach. "Feel," she said softly, looking into his eyes. William's eyes grew wide with wonder as he felt the tiny life moving beneath his palm. "Amazing," he whispered, his voice full of awe. "This baby," Grace said quietly, her hand covering his. "It will need a father, a good father who will love and protect it." William looked into her eyes, seeing the love and trust there. "I would be honored to be that father," he said, meaning every word. That night, for the first time since their marriage, Grace moved her sleeping blanket closer to William's bed. They didn't speak about it, but they both knew something important had changed between them. The walls they had built to protect themselves were slowly coming down. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Grace heard the sound of horses approaching and looked out to see 3 native men riding toward their cabin. Her heart began to race. But then she smiled with joy when she recognized one of them. "My brother," she said happily. Running outside to embrace one of the men, William watched from the doorway, his heart pounding with fear and uncertainty. He didn't know what this visit would mean for them, but he was determined to protect Grace and the baby she carried, no matter what happened. The spring morning was filled with the beautiful sound of birds singing and the gentle rustle of wind moving through the trees round the cabin. Grace walked back and forth inside the small room, her hands pressed against her lower back. The baby was coming, and it was coming very soon. William had ridden his horse as fast as he could to town to bring back Mrs. Henderson, the midwife, and Dr. Mills. His heart was pounding with both worry and excitement as he thought about his wife and the child who would soon be born. Over the past months, he had come to think of this baby as truly his own, and he couldn't wait to hold the little one in his arms. "Easy now, dear," Mrs. Henderson said in a soothing voice as she helped Grace through her labor pains. "You're doing beautifully. Everything is going just fine." Grace gripped William's hand tightly as another strong contraction passed through her body. "I'm scared," she whispered, looking into his eyes. "I'm right here with you," William said gently, brushing her damp hair away from her forehead. "I'm not going anywhere. We're in this together." Dr. Mills checked on Grace's progress and smiled warmly. "It won't be long now. This baby is very eager to meet the world." As the hours slowly passed, the small cabin filled with the sounds of new life being born. Grace's incredible strength amazed everyone who was there, and William's gentle support never stopped. When the baby finally arrived, the room became completely silent for a moment as everyone looked in wonder at the tiny miracle. "It's a girl," Dr. Mills announced with a big smile on his face. "A beautiful, perfectly healthy girl." Grace began to cry with relief and pure joy as Mrs. Henderson carefully placed the baby in her arms. The little girl had thick dark hair just like her mother and bright, alert eyes that seemed to look at everything round her with curiosity. "She's perfect," William said, his voice thick with emotion. "She's absolutely perfect in every way." "What will you call her?" Mrs. Henderson asked as she cleaned up. Grace and William looked at each other, and without having to say anything, they both knew the answer. They had talked about baby names many times during the pregnancy, and they always came back to the same special choice. "Hope," Grace said softly, looking down at her daughter. "Her name is Hope." William gently touched the baby's tiny hand with one finger, and she immediately wrapped her small fingers round it with surprising strength. "Hello, Hope," he whispered with tears in his eyes. "I'm your daddy." The news of Hope's birth spread quickly through the town of Millbrook. Many townspeople came to visit over the next few days, bringing gifts and congratulations. Even some people who had been unfriendly before seemed to change when they saw the obvious love and happiness. In the little family, Tom Bradley, who had been one of the loudest opponents of William and Grace's marriage, surprised everyone by showing up at their door with a beautiful hand-carved wooden toy horse for the baby. "Every child deserves a good start in life," he said in a gruff voice, not quite able to meet William's eyes as he spoke. As the weeks passed by, Hope grew stronger and healthier every day. She had her mother's beautiful dark hair and what seemed to be her father's gentle, calm temperament. The townspeople began to see her not as a symbol of conflict between different cultures, but as a bridge that could bring two worlds together. Grace recovered quickly from giving birth and threw herself into being a mother with complete joy. She would sing to Hope in her native language, telling her stories about her grandmother's people and their ancient traditions. William would read to her from his books, teaching her about the world she was growing up in. One evening, as they sat together by the fire watching Hope sleep peacefully in her wooden cradle, Grace turned to William with tears of happiness in her eyes. "I never thought I could be this happy again," she said quietly. "After losing my first husband, I thought my heart was broken forever and could never heal." William pulled her close to him. "Sometimes broken things can be made even stronger when they're put back together with love. I want to tell you something important," Grace said, looking into his eyes. "When I first came here, I was so angry and afraid. I thought you were my enemy. But you showed me kindness when I expected cruelty. You gave me respect when I expected nothing. You taught me that love can grow even in the darkest places." William smiled and kissed her forehead. "You taught me something too. You taught me that courage isn't just about fighting battles. Sometimes it's about opening your heart to someone different from you, as if she could sense all the love surrounding her." Hope stirred in her sleep and smiled. Both parents laughed softly, their hearts completely full of wonder at the miracle of their daughter. The end.